Hello and welcome to the Posture Dojo Podcast. My name is Sam Miller and I'll be your host on this postural transformation journey, sharing some stories from experts that you might expect and some that might be a bit more surprising. Today, I'm very excited to have Dr. Stephen Ward on the podcast. I had the pleasure and the luck and the fortune of attending a workshop with Dr. Stephen in Tulum. I got a glimpse into his life of work that he's been doing. I would describe you, Stephen, as a psychosomatic coach and healer and doctor. How do you describe yourself?
I think that's a pretty good description of me. I look at the spine, I look at posture, and from that, I'm able to understand the behavioral genetics and what behaviors are coming into a person multi-generationally. And then what I'm doing is using adjustments to release stored wounds. But I'm also giving people clarity as to the behavioral genetics that they may be seeing their life through. And then we help them to rewrite that behavioral code so they can see their life through eyes that are loving and validating and encouraging.
So where you're currently located, because I'm going to start off this by recommending your service. I think if anyone's in your area, please stop by and visit. Where can they find you to feel and see what you do?
I'm Ward Chiropractic in Long Beach, and my address is 6530 East Spring Street. And that's Long Beach, California, and the zip code is 90815. I'm chiroman.com and Adjusting Your Life on Instagram.
Let's say the typical chiropractic adjustment, you'll go in, you'll get some temporary adjustment happen, and you walk out the door and you continue thinking and behaving just like you did and end up kind of creating the same misalignments throughout the brain and therefore the nervous system and therefore the body. So I guess what fascinated me about what you do is that you're in a very short amount of time seeing each person in the workshop for 5-10 minutes individually, very quickly assess these generational issues and challenges and patterns that are being passed down in their lives, diagnosing that, and then adjusting not only their physical body, but also their psychological, emotional state. And walk us through that process. Where did this technique come from? And how do you approach somebody who comes to see you?
The founder of this work is my father, Lowell Ward. And my father began chiropractic in 1959. And he began it with this process in his mind that he wanted to document objectively the work he was doing as a chiropractor. So he had a friend that was an aerospace engineer, and he talked to his friend, and they came up with a measuring system that we could measure the body on a before and after basis so we could see if the technique was actually working. So that's where it all started. And then through the years, measurement helped us to understand that our spinal curvatures tell us about our behavioral genetics. It tells us not so much about who we are, it tells us more about who we're not. And it tells us about who influenced us in our behavioral patterning. And that's where the work really started, was just a measuring system to document treatment results. But over the years, we have identified so many patterns of behavior and its relationship to the spine. And of course, in life, so many people come to me with all sorts of problems, as you saw in Tulum. And I treat so many people, so I have 5 minutes to really break down someone's behavioral code and to give them new awareness. Because in life, if we help people with awareness, what happens is their emotional quotient goes through the roof. And the key to our EQ is our level of awareness. So if we're asleep and we're seeing our life through the eyes of someone else's behavioral program, then we're asleep in our life. But if we begin to look at our life through our own eyes, through healthy eyes, through new behavioral programs, we change our pain patterns, we change our energy field, we begin to transform our relationships, our business relationships. And that's really what I'm doing. I average close to 100 new patients a month, and I work 14 days a month. And what that means is I get a lot of people in chronic pain. They have no clue that their pain is related to behavior, and they have no clue that their pain is related to hurt that they denied that becomes pain that they feel in their body.
And you do such an amazing job at it. I get to experience this for myself. What are some of the most common behavioral codes and patterns that you see today that are often just out of our awareness?
Probably one of the bigger ones is we're programmed through a message, if you do it right. I certainly heard that. And I heard it from my parents. I heard it from teachers, coaches. If you're going to do it right, it's not worth doing if you're not going to give your best or do your best. And so that program is really about generational inadequacy. And so when people pass inadequacy generationally, they always pass it through expectation. So they say, hey, if you do it right, and it makes you believe that when you do it right, you're going to be validated. But then the behavior that I would encourage people to be aware of is, are we looking for validation, approval, encouragement, and love from someone who has mastered validation, approval, encouragement, or love? Or are we looking for it from people who've never self-validated or received validation, never self-encouraged or received encouragement, never self-loved or received healthy love? And that's commonly the case. The program says if I do it well, and that makes me believe that when I do it well, I'm going to be validated. But then what happens is people who were never validated will come in and tell you, oh, this is how you can improve. And so you do something amazing that should be celebrated. You go to someone who's wounded, and that person who's wounded doesn't know how to give you what you need. But our fantasy is that they do, right? So in a simple frame, I look at it this way. With any issue I have, with any conflict I have, I look at it, is it personal or is it generational? And the answer is, it's always generational. And then my question is, what's my fantasy? And my fantasy is that they're going to validate me, encourage me, approve of me, and love me. That's my fantasy. But what's the reality? They don't know how to do it. Okay, so that's a big one, right? So how do we change that? Oh, I give my best intention, and my best intention is always enough for me. It's never not enough. And my intention, best intention, is relative. If I'm tired, my best intention's different. If I'm in pain, my best intention's different. And so when I'm tired, I might be giving my best, but it's not the same as when I'm abundant. And when I'm in physical pain, it might not be the same as when I have no pain. And people like you and I broke my back, fractured 4 vertebrae in a fall, herniated 3 discs, and I got up and worked, and you have your own patterns that has created pain. It's how do we reframe our life and come through it in such a healthy way so that we can make the best of the challenge we're experiencing. That's a big one. But say you are self-critical, then your question should be, who did I learn criticism from? And if you have an answer for that, then that is a multi-generational projection. So then you would coach a person to say, okay, you can stay asleep and be critical like the generations of people before you, or you can wake up and be kind and loving to yourself. But we're taught if you're crying as a child, you're taught if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. So you're taught to internalize hurt instead of express our hurt. And when we internalize hurt, what do we see in every cancer profile? We see a reversal of the lumbar curve, meaning that when they get hurt, they want to internalize that hurt. And they don't know how to express it in a healthy way. And so these are just a few examples, but I think they're all important to be mindful of, that every behavior that we have inherited, it's our job to look at it and rewrite that code, not stay asleep in a behavior that's been present for generations.
Beautiful. So we went through kind of a different kind of perspective on a few different patterns. I would really love to give people an idea of how, or at least like how I see what you're doing, which is one, like identifying these patterns which are misaligned, which your first example was having these fantastical expectations of doing it all the time imposed by someone who may not have had that validation themselves, which caused this endless seeking of validation, which doesn't happen, and that reflects in the body somehow. So how would that pattern reflect in the body?
It reflects in the body as so often we'll have shoulder blade pain. But to answer your question, so I get a new person and they come in, I have them sit on the table and I will do a shoulder test. So I'll put my hands on the shoulder. I'm going to identify if their right shoulder dropped or left shoulder dropped. If their right shoulder dropped, then I'm going to be discussing with them how they're seeking approval from a female, so often a dominant female, and a dominant female as a rule will curve to the left. So we'll see it in firstborn females following females surrounded by brothers will all produce more dominant females that operate more in masculine energy than feminine. And so when we identify them, they're dropping left. Whereas a lot of men today are actually dropping in their right shoulder, which is indicative of being female parent influenced. And so they're influenced by their female parent, and because they're more present with that female parent. And then we want to believe they're healthy and they know how to be healthy and supporting and loving and validating. But if they feel inadequate, they're not a man. Are they going to validate a man? Probably not. They're going to set high expectations for the man. And when the man does something amazing, they're going to negate that man. But that's where I start. I'm going to look at shoulder drop. And then I'm going to look at functional short leg deficiency. So we're going to lie the person on their stomach. And we're going to see if the left leg short or the right leg short. Okay. And it's interesting because in my career, I've seen so many men with right short legs and so many women with left short legs. But more recently, in the last couple of years, I'm seeing more men in left short leg. They've always been right short, but now they're left short. Why? Because they're so self-driven. And so no matter what they attain, it's never enough. You go to a bodybuilder and you ask them, at what point have you lifted enough weight? What is their answer? It's never enough. And so what does that mean? Someone negated them instead of validated them and celebrated them. And so our process is really looking at things energetically. Are you over defensive, meaning you have a lot of root abandonment issues? Are you more in an emotional breakdown, meaning your body is more sensitive? And so when we're more sensitive, like I'm right leaning and I'm forward in curve, so I'm all emotion, right? I want to be validated by these women that weren't validated by their fathers. And of course, what a fantasy that is. And anyway, there's just so much that we can discuss on these topics. And I get overly excited, and I want to get back to you asking a question.
Yeah. So we can hone in on this podcast. We talk a lot about this, which of course is that sideways curvature happening in different parts of the spine, and then we have the hyperkyphosis, that forward head posture. What are some common, let's say, generational patterns that you're seeing that are very worthy of exploration by someone with these types of conditions?
We're going to look at a right scoliosis, and we're going to identify that the source of that is multi-generational female dysfunction. And we're going, so if you're a male and you curve in your body, then that means you see your life through the eyes of a female that was more present and a lot of times more dominant. And so that male is actually asleep because to be a male showing up in the front spinal curve, you need to curve left into masculine. But so many men today are curving right and forward sitting and right and backward standing. And so when they curve right and backward, the right curve is seeking female approval, so often from a dominant female source who has father trauma. But the backward curvature of the spine really is referencing the male parent that works, that's absent, that abandons, that doesn't know how to love, okay? And so when we see that's a mixed pattern, so we would call that a full defensive pattern on a male, because you talk to a lot of men about emotion, and you'll say, oh, you're really emotional. They'll say, no, I'm not. But when they seek approval from a dominant female, and the dominant female criticizes them, then it triggers in them a feeling of inadequacy, and then they lose self-regulation, and then they operate in full emotional reaction, okay? So that's a denial pattern. But a common pattern for women would be backward and left. So they are in a logic pattern, meaning the spine's curving left into logic, and that means they seek male approval. They are more comfortable in masculine energy than feminine energy. Their mental minds dictating their physical body. And they're also backward in curvature, which indicates they want to be loved by their father. They wanted to hear how much their father loves them, how happy their father was that they were a female, because so many issues that are happening with ladies today are ladies who are backward and left in curve. So their mental mind's driving them. It's dictating their physical body. And their physical body is struggling because it's a dishonesty pattern. It's, oh, I'm really tired, but I'm going to go do this and handle this and take this on. Whereas what they're needing to work on is not being tough and strong and dominant and masculine. That's not, they're great at that stuff. What they're needing to work on is expanding their vulnerability within their life. Wow, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overloaded. I'm feeling inadequate. I'm feeling hurt. I don't know how to express the hurt I feel. So what do ladies do when they lose self-regulation? They get hurt. Because they're left in curve, they become verbal. They become authoritative. And then they lose self-regulation, which means they say hurtful words. And to a male that they're attracting who is emotionally dominant, it's just really devastating for that male, right? And then, of course, the male reacts in anger, and then they never let that go. It's, you got really angry, and you said all this stuff. Well, what about all the verbal bashing that took place before the emotional reaction? Those are common. That's a very common pattern. Right curve men are attracting left curve women. They're attracted to the empathy in the right curve man. And because a lot of times men who are right curve will hit dysfunction with empathy, which is a big mistake. We got to coach men differently so that they can have more powerful relationships, so that they can begin to get into the masculine inside of them.
Just to make sure we're on the same page here, we're seeing, we've identified that one of the most common curves that you're seeing in men today is a right curve, which is signifies a potential type of, it's either a dominant female that was very influential in their kind of formative years, either a absent father or not as masculine, not as dominant masculine energy in that upbringing. So then there's also feminine domination and dysfunction in there. And then there's also empathy that is transferred from the feminine, is that empathetic emotion, right? So
we're programmed to, when female dysfunction hits, if we're mother influence, we're programmed to go, oh, what can I do? How can I help? How can I fix that? How can I make it better for you? But we need to be mindful that wounding is always before our relationships. So we're wounded, and then I had major wound, had a very strong mother, and my dad was a brilliant chiropractor, but worked a lot. So I was there with my strong mother. And so I then got programmed to seek female approval, but I wasn't programmed to see that the women I was going to seek into my life had never been validated by their fathers, had all this father wound, and that wound inside of them is before me, not because of me. So I cannot, hitting it with empathy is not solving the issue, right? And it took me years and years to realize how my dominance had been manipulated in my childhood, and how at that point of manipulation, I then learned to raise empathy. And so when I had empathy assessment, they found me to be a 99% empath. And they said, the advice they gave me is, you should never raise empathy because you're so high empathy. And so anyway, but it's so powerful just having clarity that men are so common backward and right. And so absent father in the backward curve seeking female approval. And then they're seeking women who are backward and left, father trauma. They think they would have been loved if they were a male. They operate more comfortably in masculine. And that is a mess beyond measure.
So once we have that awareness, I guess, of the psychological trauma, but which is essentially the scene of the crime. We've collected evidence. We've got awareness now of, okay, we can go to a more specific place in our mind, in our memories, and in the experiences that we had, and observe and start awareness on where we can take our psychological state and essentially re-traumatize that area with a more positive direction, right? So how do you reflect people back into alignment?
First of all, our adjusting protocol is extremely powerful. We incorporate wall adjustments, so I can take someone who's dropped 1.5 inches in their shoulder, and in less than a minute, I can do a simple adjustment to bring them into complete balance. But then I'm going to coach them on how are you going to stay in balance. That's the key element. I can bring you into balance, but how are you going to stay in balance? That's the key. And so I'm going to coach them, hey, really look at this issue of your need for outside approval. Get into a program where you get focused in on your intentional energy. When you give your best intention, circle back every time and validate your greatness. So when you go through your life, you're building on your greatness. You're not in a wound looking for a wounded person to give you what you need. You're repairing your wounds by coming up with a new behavioral program that allows you to completely reframe that energy. And the adjustments we do are remarkable. And in my clinic, it's not unusual, being a high empath, for me to treat someone who's in incredible pain. I might treat them 3 to 4 times in the same day, every 90 minutes to 2 hours, because my adjustment protocol takes a couple minutes to balance the shoulder drop, to balance the short leg, takes seconds to take a person who's in 1.5 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch short leg and balance it. But then we got to coach them. We got to coach them on, hey, let's work within a new strategy. Let's work within a new program. Let's start with a purpose. What is your purpose? You ask people what their purpose is. They give you all sorts of answers, right? And so what do I encourage? I encourage all people to get into a purpose of love. No purpose is greater than a purpose of love. And so I'll ask the new patient, when was the last time you told yourself you love yourself? And the new patient will say, I've never done that. And I'll say, okay, let's do it together. So if it's a female, I'll say, follow me. I choose to love myself today. And they say, I choose to love myself today. And then I say, I choose to love the wonderful woman I was created to be. And then they say, I choose to love the wonderful woman I was created to be. And then I say, I give my best intention. My best is always enough. We're building our life on our greatness, which is our intentional energy, not our outcome. Okay. And so it's super important that we get into clarity, that we can reframe our thoughts. If we've learned behavioral programs from someone, then we can learn new behavioral programs in our life. So it's just a matter of, hey, if you learn one thing, we can put in time and actually learn something else, something other than that. And so it just takes some time. And I'm gifted. I'm a gifted man. I'm gifted at healing. I'm gifted at communication. A lot of that's because when I was little, I was born 2.5 months early, and I was so ill as an infant. I was in an incubator for 8 weeks, and when I finally went home, I had to sleep on my dad's chest because my heart always stopped. And there was times I went without oxygen for a period of time, which set up incredible speech impediments for me and learning disabilities for me. It took me 10 years of going to speech therapy nearly every day to reframe out of that program, which, by the way, was a generational inadequacy program. Okay. And then at age 5, I came down with the Hong Kong flu. It settled in my spine, and they put me in a full body cast for a year. And out of the cast, it took my dad an additional year to get me out of my wheelchair. And that's where he first discovered the functional short leg deficiency was on me, by noting that when he could get me walking, I walked with such an incredible limp. But he would test it on the table and he'd say, wow, you're okay. But then he flexed the heels to the buttocks and he realized, wow, I had a 2-inch right short leg. He built a 2-inch heel on the outside of my right shoe, which people thought he was nuts. And immediately I could walk. And where I am today as a doctor that helps people heal is I came from a problem. And so I have great empathy for people and problems, and because there's probably not a doctor on the planet that will treat a person 4 times in the same day. However, all my life it's been about one thing, and that's about getting a result. And for me, getting a result outweighs any amount of money I can ever be paid. And I'm just a simple walk-in clinic. I take no appointments. And I charge a very nominal fee, but I heal people, I influence lives, and I help them to understand that they are their best healer, not me. I am as great as they allow me to be, but I'm not able to heal them without their help. And I think that's what makes me really a powerful doctor, is because I realize the power is in the patient, not in me. I can lead them to the water. I cannot make them drink it.
I agree. Our greatest purpose is to love ourselves and therefore the other. Our wellness is one of the greatest gifts that we can give to the world. And I heard someone say, if you want to practice love, then think of the thing that's the hardest thing to love and love that. And for a lot of people with these type of conditions, suffering the mental anguish of those formative years where you're trying to work out what kind of person you are, and having very visible physical curves can play a lot on the mind. And it can be, I know I started just in ignorance, right? Just trying to ignore it. I'm just going to live with it and just ignore it. But that's not quite healing. The healing begins when you look at it and you face reality, and you engage in that awareness with love, with self-love. Talk to me about that. And I think each program has its own kind of direction that you've mentioned, right? Doing it right. If you're going to do it right, will have its own kind of reframing. Seeking validation, you seek yourself. Walk me through what is self-love to you?
Self-love to me is being kind to myself and not critical. It's realizing that I have an abundance of value within me, that it's not, my value's not in what I do, it's in who I am. and I come up with actions of love. So I ride my bike to work and I get 6 hours of massage a week, and I walk on the beach and I eat healthy. And so all these are actions of love. But I think it's important to give the viewer some awareness. Back to the point I made earlier, is it personal or generational? It's always generational. And when we identify that people who wounded us were wounded before us, so the wound wasn't really personal, it was a projection of their own wounding. And when we give people clarity on that, it's easier to go into forgiveness because we realize, oh, wow, that person was severely wounded and then became my parent and didn't know how to be healthy. I had an expectation of my parent that they knew how, but they didn't know how. And when we reframe that, and that's where Scripture, Bible says, that we're influenced by 5 to 7 generations, which is true. You go back to the start of your family tree, and the programs that they started with were passed on from one generation to the next. And then the forgiveness angle in Scripture says we are to forgive 70 times 7. Why is that? Because it's all generational. And so when we get into clarity of those simple points, then we can see someone's wound differently, not personally. And when we see it generationally, not personally, we really come out of our wounded history way quicker than if, oh gosh, you did this to me, and now I got to go through 20 years of working through it. When, no, you don't need to do that. You need to realize that you had a fantasy, and your fantasy was someone who was wounded knew how to be healthy. And you reframe that program and realize, no, they knew how to project their wound. And then you personalized it, which we should not do, right? We should be like, okay, you're critical of me. Well, you have a right to be critical of me, Sam. You have a right to be that way towards me. However, I have a right to love me when you're critical of me. And that's what I'm going to choose to do. What's going to happen with the critic? The critic is going to fly away because their need is for you to carry the projection or transfer. Wow, to me, I'm tearing up here, but to me, it's not a hard game. It's a more simple game. But we do need to give people clarity of these simple awarenesses, because if we start seeing people from wound and we start realizing the wounds before the projection, so when I attract a wounded person, it's not really about me, it's before me. And if my need is for them to fix my wound inside of me, and their need is for me to fix the wound inside of them, wow, why are relationships failing at the level of failure, right? So many relationships fail. And then the ones that somehow make it, well, what do they have going? They have high levels of denial because they are in so often opposite patterns of behavior. And again, if you have same patterns, that's a whole different dynamic, right? Most common, we're seeing opposite patterns, but we can also see people who have same patterns. Like you observed in Tulum, there was a couple, and they both have father abandonment, and they both had dominant mothers, and they both needed each other's validation. And what would happen is they both wanted to be right all the time. And in needing to be right, it triggers in them low self-regulation and a lot of reaction. And so what's happening? They're reacting and someone's running out the door. And there's just so much to looking at the body holistically, not segmentally. If the medical model, because they got all the people coming that have illnesses. They have so many people coming. They're taking segmental x-rays. They're looking at your neck or your mid-back or your lower back, but they're not looking at you holistically. And then they're lying you down and they're taking MRIs with you lying down when you were in a car accident hit at 50 miles an hour. Where is the wisdom in that? Right? My hope is through podcasts like this with you, my friend, who I think you're just an amazing man, is helpful for the world to begin to look at trauma differently so that we are not going through our life looking at a segment to try to figure out the whole and what your body's doing and where your energy is systemically. So anyway, I jumped ahead a little bit. But anyway, I get carried away.
You do, and you love what you do, and seeing you in flow is amazing. I know I absorbed so much. I had someone on my Instagram, and I saw the right curve, and I'm like, just throwing this out there, random question, but did you have a dominant female in your life and a kind of a male, and it wasn't in the picture? You're a wizard. I'm like, no, I was just paying attention to Dr. Stephen Ward. That was it. But there is so much to learn here. So there's each of these programs, each of these traumas, these patterns that are passed down that are not us, that are just passed down they're passing us on our journey. The reason why loving yourself is the greatest gift or your greatest purpose is because without that, by internalizing it, by putting it in a silo through denial, we're essentially packaging it up and passing it on to the next generation, passing it on to the people we come in contact with in our relationships and our children. So this path of realizing that, like this, no matter what this pattern is, and there's a bunch of different ones that we've talked about, there are these broad, general kind of affirmations that I know you really drove in, like about whatever your best is enough, right? Like when you do your best, that is enough. There's certain things, loving yourself, choosing to be the great person that you are. I love the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, because it covers so many bases. And I know in different stages of my healing journey, when my eyes are closed and I'm in a certain pose, or I'm releasing some tension, or I'm in a breathwork ceremony, when I am very connected to a place in my body that I know needs healing, I don't always know, the energy in here is because of this, because of that. I'm not even in that realm of thought. I'm allowing what needs to be felt. And if I'm ready to dig deep or explore more, I'll go through that. I'll say those things, or I'll think those things to that area of my body. And I'll feel different things when I'm saying different things. It might be about forgiveness. It might be about the thank you. And it's very surprising. And sometimes I don't even know what it is. But by going through there and covering the bases, I know that I'm allowing that energy, the attention, the space, and the passageway to be healed and released from the body.
That's so powerful. All of it is about just reframing our brain and reframing our thoughts and getting excited about it. Looking every day, people say, wow, you know so much, you know so much. I feel like I'm at the infancy of awareness. I'm thankful that I have the awareness I have. But the true journey is being open to growth, being open to awareness, being open to learning, staying out of ego. They're not even in me. Ego strengthens in me. I know I have some awareness. I have an openness to gain more awareness. And I think, where will I be in 20 years? And so it's such a journey to grow. But let me touch on something too. The backward and right curve that we see in men a lot of times becomes prostate cancer in their life. And the backward and left curve that we see in women becomes autoimmune, left breast, left ovary cancer. So these are really important awarenesses to start reframing out of, right? If I have a backward and right curve, what's my journey? Not to be emotional, because I'm a master at emotion and a master at emotional reaction. So what's the journey for the emotional male to regulate emotion, to realize, I can feel that hurt. However, I'm going to come into my challenge non-emotionally, not emotionally. And what's the journey for the masculine female? It's to realize that when she gets hurt, she should have a directive that she doesn't become verbally abusive towards that male in her life because she's angry at her father who didn't know how to love her, right? And so the journey for the masculine female is to soften their heart, to realized that they had an expectation, and that expectation, like so many times, what happens when we have an expectation? We have a letdown. So if I have an expectation of my parent that they know how to be healthy, but all they know how to do is transfer the generational program that's been moving forward for many generations, we need to identify that, right? So if you're a male, you need to realize that when you're emotional and you attract a non-emotional woman, and then you're going to take your hurt internally, you're setting forward a Cancer profile. And when you're a woman and you're going to verbally get angry, but you're not going to express the hurt that you feel, you're setting up a program of Cancer in your body. And to me, just from this one podcast, a lot of people should be hearing this and say, wow, I'm left leaning, I'm right leaning. Oh, wow, that's my story. And because these things resonate across the board, and even in different cultures, these programs are playing out. And so it's just so important that we understand we have power, and our power is to love. Our power is to be kind, to be joyful, to be grateful, thankful, to encourage, to validate, to stay in our faith, to be gentle, to have self-regulation, self-control. Watch every word has power. And we cannot afford to be loose with our tongue. So when we react emotionally, the problems that manifest are big. And when we react verbally, those programs are setting up problems in our health and our life. So
on empowerment, we have the healing, all the healing journeys begin when we're, okay, these traumas, these patterns aren't me, but what is me is the decision to love myself more each day, to be kind, to do all these things. And that belief that you can actually, that journey is worth taking is that you have the power to do that. So how did so many people end up disconnected, from this ability of self-love and self-healing?
It all goes to the level of awareness. You're either aware or you're not aware. And most people go through their life, they're born in their sleep, they're little kids in their sleep, they're young adults in their sleep, they're adults in their sleep, they're older people in their sleep, and then they die in their sleep. And what do I mean by that? They see their life through someone else's program. And if we're asleep in our life, then that means that we are looking at our life through someone else's eyes. So what do we need to do?
Example of that? What's a quick example of that?
I inherited criticism. Now I'm going to be self-critical, and now I'm going to be critical of you. If I never experienced someone who was critical of me, would you know how to be critical of you? Would you then know how to transfer criticism to someone else? Or if you do it right, okay, and then I'm going to look for approval from a wounded person. And then the wounded person is going to come in and tell me what I did, I can do better. I can do better at this and this. And then I'm going to think that, okay, when I do better, I'm going to get validated. And then I give even more effort. I go to the wounded person. They negate me again. It's all through awareness. EQ is so important to be conscious of, because when we have high EQ, and I was measured at a 98.6 in 2016, I'm sure my EQ has dropped since, however, because my level, I'm still high empathy, but I never hit dysfunction with empathy. So whereas in 2018, I hit all dysfunction with empathy. And now in 2024, I hit no dysfunction with empathy. Okay. So as a result, my empathy is lower. So my EQ is lower, but I'm way healthier. So it's important, but it is through our awareness that we make the changes. We're either aware or we're unaware.
And we're aware of these eyes that have been wounded and how their influence in our lives have formed our eyes now.
Right, exactly.
And how common is it to have eyes that are someone who is truly empowered to heal themselves?
it's not as common as you think, because first of all, we have to get clarity on, are we seeing our life through someone else's eyes, or are we seeing our life through our own? And with the most common pattern I see, backward and left in females, they're seeing their life through the wounds of not feeling loved by their father and a generational wounding pattern there. And with the men, they're seeing their life through wanting to be enough for their mothers who had father abandonment trauma, and trying so hard to be enough, but no matter what they do, it's not enough, right? And then what happens is they have anger and they project it onto a male. What does the male do? He runs for the hills. He abandons, right? So a very common pattern is a passive male who had a dominant mother will go to work rather than protect the kids from the mother who's verbally abusive, right? But what do we really need that father to do, right? We need the father to say, hey, honey, all those wounds are before you ever had your kids, and taking out all your anger from your wounded childhood is not the fault of your children, right? And so if we start beginning to heal the parent, we will heal the children, and we will see less autoimmune, less cancer profiles. Cancer profiles are gender issues. If you're curving right, that's a male and emotion. If you're curving left, that's a male and masculine. If you're curving right for a female, that's a woman in emotion. What is she going to do? Personalize the dominant female. She's going to get so hurt by that projection, right? But if in most common, we're seeing women curve left, so that wound is with that masculine person. And we need to work on healing these issues. We heal these issues. And then when we see a spine that curves left and right, that's gender confusion, right? But then I've seen only a couple examples of transgender, but in those couple examples, they showed up in all 4 patterns of behavior. Wow. They're like say backward and left standing and forward and right sitting. So they're representing in completely different behavioral programs from one position of load to the other. That's why positional images are vital. How do we know if we can help? We want to see if the spine changes from standing to seated. If it changes, prognosis is far better. If that curvature is the same standing and sitting, that curvature is more pathological, right? So like a hyperkyphosis and a scoliosis, it might be more challenging to shift if it's the same in both positions of load. But what do we want? And again, I'm talking so much, but let me just make one more point. When we're in trauma, we need to stand up, not sit down, because we're far more emotional when we sit. We have less defense. And so when someone's critical, you stand up, you hold your head up, and you realize that's why we armor. The Bible says you put on the full armor of God. Why do we do that? Because the world's coming at you in fear. They're not coming at you in love. If the world comes at you in love, you don't need to be armored.
And that is where we were going. We were on a thread of walking through the reasons why people aren't as empowered to go on this healing journey. In scoliosis kyphosis, oftentimes it's being diagnosed. There's so many medical terms that are beyond understanding and knowledge. Plus, you can't see it, so you have the X-ray. There's that obstacle, and then you go to the specialist or the orthopedic surgeon, and they're like, you're either a candidate or not for surgery. And if you're not, then good luck. You're living with it. We'll check to make sure it doesn't progress, and hopefully you don't become a candidate for the surgery in the future. And so that experience is really common for a lot of people with these types of conditions. And it ultimately, the most damaging part of that is the disempowerment that happens. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. And obviously there's quite a lot. And that's part of the point of these types of conversations. And then from the emotional and physical, we've walked through some of the emotional things. Let's share that journey of, you've shared like what the journey looks like for each one, but let's talk about empowering yourself on this journey, because that's oftentimes finding proof that this is working, right? Because a lot of people who haven't done this stuff before, they're like, oh, looking in the mirror, they're just saying it, I choose to love myself, and maybe there's not that feeling there, and they're doubtful about this. What would you suggest to someone to really foment the belief in their power to be able to go on this journey?
Everything starts with embedding commands. So we look at it as affirmations, but they're really embedded commands. What we say, we believe, and if we say it enough, we believe it to be true. So I said, oh, because I had speech impediments and learning disabilities, I had all these challenges that none of my friends had, I said, I'm stupid. Where did it lead me? It led me to getting kicked out of high school, right? Because my belief was I was stupid. Then I move in with my dad, and my dad said, son, you're brilliant. You remember every movie. And then I had a teacher my senior year, and the teacher said, Steve, you're so smart. You're really smart. I'm like, no, that's not me. But I had a couple people in my life that helped me to understand and that I had a different opportunity. And my mom was super amazing too, because she took me to speech therapy every day. And I would get so angry at her because I was a great athlete, but I couldn't talk really well. And I would be so angry at my mom and my mom's son. Now, when you have this all resolved, I will not take you to speech therapy any longer. But how this really works is we embed commands. So I choose to love myself. I choose to love the wonderful man I was created to be. I build my life on my greatness. I give my best intentions always enough for me. I'm gonna circle back and drive that home. I believe these embedded commands to be accurate and true. I believe them to be accurate and true. I'm going to take it out of that and put it into a stronger awareness. I believe that this love for me is real and true. And if I believe it to be true, you better believe you'll start seeing a change in your life, right? You won't be looking for someone who never loved themselves to love you. You'll be like, wow, I feel for you that you haven't learned the solution to a healthier life begins with your commitment to loving you. Things happen that are bad in your life, and things happen that are great in your life. But when things happen that are bad, it's an opportunity for you to love yourself, to realize that the world is wounded, and wounded people wound people. And it's important that we are circling back constantly, developing tools that allow us to have our great life, our joyful life, our loving life. And yeah, I think that's the realness of it, is we're embedding, we're looking at it, and we're looking at programs, and we're saying, oh, I'm hard on myself. Who did I learn it from? I feel inadequate inside of me. Who negated me? Or, oh, I'm so self-driven. Why would that be? Why would a weightlifter feel as if there's no point that they lifted enough weight? What would be the reason for that? The only reason for that is negation instead of celebration, instead of validation. And so we all have power to influence.
So let's look at the flip side of that, because sometimes I believe a lot of the times our weakness, when understood and when harnessed, can become our greatest strength. We look at our weakness and we can find that greatest strength. Let's say we have two people who have healed these wounds, and they have a child, and they're not being passed on wounds. Is that possible? And if it was possible, wouldn't that be a little boring?
I don't know. I think when you're producing healthier kids, you get to see the greatness that you have learned to accept in you, seen in your children. So you're able to see them grow in ways that you never even thought were possible. And for instance, you have two parents that are working on loving self and being healthier, realize their wound is not their partner's to repair, it's their job to repair. And then they are having a child and they're neutral. They're like, oh, I'm just so excited to have a child, and I'm not going to put on it, I want a son, I want a daughter. I'm going to love my child. I'm going to love my child if it's a female. I'm going to love my child if it's a male. What influence are we going to have on that child's life? Less autoimmune, less gender cancers, right? Yeah, it might be a little dull and boring, right? But the truth of the matter is we don't need to be hard on ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. And we need to realize that we are always evolving, and we're evolving in great ways.
Yeah, I say that in jest because there is a certain part of hustle culture right now which is identified like what their edge is. And there is like a level of obsession that they've identified as seeking for approval. And that's why they're constantly overworking. And I guess it's more from the types that are the hustle and grind types, right? So there's different types of reflections and ways to harness this forward. Healing these wounds can look a little different for each person, but by embedding them through these phrases, these very powerful phrases that basically dictate the frequency of your electromagnetic being, they set your vibe. The more you think and embody and embed. So that embodying and embedding happens through feeling. So not just reciting it and saying it mindlessly, actually feeling it. Feeling it, and even communicating with the body language that's congruent with what you're saying. You're bringing it into that feeling level, and that's upgrading your whole existence.
It absolutely is. Everything is energy. And we either are operating in low vibrational energy or we're operating in high vibrational energy. And when we're in low vibrational energy, we're judging, we're shaming, we're blaming, we're guilting, we're criticizing, we're resenting, we're negating, we're setting unreasonable expectations, all very low vibrational energy. But when we're operating in vibrational energy, you saw me reading people and coaching people, and you saw the vibrational energy. And if you see me in my clinic, I'm vibrating so high, and I might have 50 people come to me on a Saturday, and I may treat 30 of them 2-3 times and a couple of them 4 times. And I get to the end of the day, I'm not even tired, right? And then I go speak at a little event, and then all of a sudden people want me to coach them. They line up to be coached. And it's not a fatigue, it's a joy and a love. And when you love it, it's so effortless. And when you do it without expectation, I never tie the outcome on a patient. It's not, oh, I have value if I help you feel better. No, I have value because I have a desire to help you feel better. It's my intention to help you. It's not, I don't get caught up. I used to. When I first became a chiropractor, I started with muscular dystrophy kids, Duchenne muscular dystrophy kids. And we started realizing that many of those kids had father abandonment. And so they would naturally withdraw. But then we realized that kids who followed an abortion and had father abandonment, they would check out and they would die really early, right? And then we found that when mothers wanted daughters and got sons, because Duchenne only impacts boys, we found those kids did really well. They had high expectation. So here's 3 examples of a disease program. And we're going to show in our upcoming docuseries, we're going to show a 40-year-old Duchenne boy. He's going to be 40 in a few months. And we're going to show that this young man has doubled his life expectation. How did he do that? You're going to see in his interview. He loves himself. He has value for himself. He believes in himself. He sees how powerful he is. He loves to be an influence for others. You know, we're not always given the greatest cards, right? But it's how do we deal with the cards we're given? Do we fall apart, or do we find a strength within that allows us to be even more powerful? So that's
when it gets fun. That's when it gets fun. I think when you've done that work where your energy is flowing, you're not siloing or trapping or internalizing, blocking, truly limiting your energetic flow. And so many people with postural issues, as they start decompressing, against or with gravity, they're restricting flow, and there's less energy and less vitality. So what it looks like when someone is fully healed is that you do have this optimal energy flow, and when you're on that purpose, when you have a direction, when you're truly obsessed with the process. You said earlier on that you're results driven, but your actual validation, your actual enjoyment is coming from the process, from actually caring enough to show up and help people heal. And the results are a natural byproduct of that.
Absolutely. That's how it works. And it's, for me, healing is so effortless. And I've been doing it with a broken back for the last 6 years. So I've had to really work through extreme levels of pain. And so funny, because early on I was fully bent over for the first 2.5 years, but I could still do all my wall adjustments. But I wasn't open to a fusion of my whole lower back because I feel like I've just began. And there's so much in me. People would say to me, "Doc, you're the kindest and happiest man I've ever met, and you can't even hardly walk." And our injuries, our wounds, they don't cause us to have an outcome. We have power over our outcome through intention. We have power over our outcome through words. Someone would say, "Doc, you look terrible." And I'd say, "Now, if you saw me yesterday, you would be jumping for joy as how great I look today." Because I know that the power in healing is a belief that I can heal. And here I am, doing much, much better because I've stayed the course and I didn't jump into a surgery. Why? Because the model needs to be upgraded. We need to not be assessing people lying down. We need to be assessing them in greatest positional load. We need to understand we're holistic beings. We're not segmental beings. So when I thought about a surgery and I thought, you're going to lie me down, assess my trauma, and then based on that, you're going to define the surgery because I'm in so much pain when I stand and sit. To me, it didn't make sense to me. How is that possible? Is it possible that spine changes when you lie to sit or when you sit to stand? We can see that in every case, that the body changes so dramatically from one position to another. That's my hope. My hope, and I pray and hope that the great minds, because there are so many brilliant people, brilliant neurologists, brilliant pediatrists, brilliant chiropractors, brilliant physical therapists. Let's upgrade it. Let's look at a model differently. Let's stitch the segments together. Let's database the different diseases. Let's get into what the behavioral code is. Let's reframe it early on in their life instead of waiting until they have a massive problem.
Our bodies are amazing machines and beings and electromagnetic beings, essentially. When you mentioned a couple times, and that's a really big kind of idea I can tell you want to get out there, is that to truly understand and assess the spine, it's about seeing how it is when it's under load standing and when it's under load when you're sitting as well. Because currently, if you just lie down, it's looking something that's built vertically, but you're taking it off. You're taking gravity out of the equation, and then even just the spine, like we have so much of our muscles and our fascia that is compensating for years to manage these imbalances that are happening. And that's why I believe after scoliosis fusion surgery, a lot of the curves will continue to progress because the root cause, either the mental pattern, which therefore affects the breathing, which affects their body language, the way they hold themselves, even affects their idea that they can go out and get stronger and build that core strength and do work and do the gym and do different lifestyle changes that would put them on a healing path. So it's by looking at just the spine, there's so much that's being lost. But through our wounds, we learn, and we're given the opportunity to pass those lessons on to other people, as you've done.
Let me make a comment about what you just said. We can take Harrington rods and we can take out a curvature in the spine, but then that person's unable to slump. And when they're unable to slump, they have a whole nother set of issues that take place within their body. So when we look at it one dimensionally, instead of looking at it from both the front and side, so yes, we can take out a curvature, but what are we doing to the side curvature? And what happens when that person can't slump? And what happens when that spine's fully flat? Now you have no defense. So the person so often can be in chronic pain. And so there's just things that we need to look at. I'm no expert on the angle that you're coming from, because I'm more of the angle of, hey, you got a pattern that I'm going to do the very best I can to help assist you to slow down that pattern. But I have seen people who had Harrington rods put in that they're so severe, they're so exhausted, they're in so much pain. And yes, one curve's better, the other curve's worse. It's just, if for the brilliant minds out there, maybe some of what we're talking about will make some sense, and someone's going to come along and take this way beyond where I have. And I'm glad to be, my dad was a genius. His work in behavior is unbelievable. And to pass it on to me and to help make me amazing in my own way. And it's certainly different than my dad. We were super different, but I'm just thankful. Boy, I'm thankful for him. I'm thankful for me. I'm thankful for you. It's people like you that are making such a big impact on the world, because you're getting a message out. And I just love that. I love you for that. And I'm thankful that you asked me to do this. This is actually my first time ever doing this. So I asked Jamie to come in and help assist me, because I got to tell you, I would have never gotten to this point without him.
I hope you're doing more, because the work you're doing is profound, is needed, and it provides a path to so many people to be able to start realizing the power that they do have, and to become empowered on that journey. And I think that step alone is one of the most powerful things that I hope people get out of this conversation.
Right. A teacher back when I was studying for my chiropractic boards said the difference between a winner and a loser is a winner takes one additional step. So be willing to take a step in love. Be willing to build on your greatness. Be willing to focus in on, when you give your best intention, it's always enough, even if you're exhausted the day you give your best. And that doesn't mean that if you were abundant, your best wouldn't be different. But it means that based on where you are energetically and physically, your best in that moment is enough and something to build on.
There it is. The foundations to a optimally flowing mind and body, a posture that is proud, a posture that is healthy, and a posture that is emanating love internally and externally. I think we've done good work here. Dr. Stephen Ward, thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing this. I'm privileged, and I'm very grateful that you've made the time to do this, because there is so much wisdom through your father and through your life of experience as well that I know needs to get out there. So I'm glad that I have the opportunity to help you do that. I know I've already integrated so much of what you taught me into what I'm doing as well.
I love you for so many reasons, but thank you for asking me to do this. And actually, if I'm asked, I step up. And so often I'm just working on this other thing, because we're going to blow up the world with the things we're going to be showing in upcoming docuseries.
And where's the best place to watch, to keep updates with that? Where's the best place people can?
Right now, the best thing to do, you can go to Chiroman. It gives you a little bit of information, not like what you and I covered today, but adjusting your life. We're going to be posting more, and just be patient. Yes, on Instagram, and just be patient with me, because it is a process, and I am a right curve man. So I do want to put out such a powerful program for the world to see. And so we're planning on being prepared with our first season early next year. And we're actually filming 3 different seasons. We're filming the first season, which really was all healing done in my clinic. The second season was more outside of the clinic, past the workshops that I've done. And the third one is going to be the behavioral code of the family. And in this family, we will be discussing 4 sisters, then 3 brothers. So it's 7 siblings. And so this family starts with 4 daughters, then goes to 3 sons. So when you see the sister against the brother, the sisters against the sisters, the brothers and what they're attracting, the sisters and what they're attracting, and then you get into the kids, and we're going to be showing 2 identical twin sons, and we're going to show how their behaviors are similar, but one is more severe than the other. I just think the world's going to really appreciate it and enjoy it. And I enjoy it, so it really doesn't matter if the world enjoys it anyway, because what I do is what I love, and what I'm going to do every day of my life from this day going forward is just bring love to the world and bring joy to the world. I had a patient, I'll end on this, that said, "You know what you are?" And I said, "Ooh, I don't know what you're going to say here." And then my patient said, "You're a love and joy provider. Everyone's your kid, and you're teaching everyone to love and be joyful in their life." And I thought that was a great way of describing who I am.
And I can attest to that as well. I love you for who you are and what you've done in my own healing journey as well. Profound, powerful clarity and awareness and direction on my journey. So thank you for that.
Thank you, my friend.
I invite all of you out there to take that extra step, take that one more step that maybe your ancestors may not have taken yet, and you have the invitation officially to take that step. And if you've listened to this conversation, you listen to this podcast, and you start saying those things, looking at yourself in the mirror, you're already taking that step. So thank you for doing that for yourself and for the world. We'll see you in the next one.
All right, Sam. Thank you so much.